We went for breakfast early on this, our last day on the ship, as we had about an 8 o'clock departure from the ship to the airport. And so we just had something to eat, and then we took a few minutes to take some last pictures of the area that we had just came into maybe a couple of hours ago. And as you see this plane leaving the local airport, that would be us in about 5 hours, as our flight was scheduled to leave. After we finished our breakfast, we went down to deck 5 just to sit and wait for our turn to go to the gangplank and make our way off the ship. We would walk off the ship and then head to our bus that would take us to the airport. Had about a 5-hour wait at the airport for our flight back to Montreal. We would leave Fort Lauderdale and then fly from Fort Lauderdale to Montreal and end up having to overnight in Montreal on this New Year's Eve, as our flight to Goose Bay would not take place until the next day. But it was a good flight of 2.5 hours, and we boarded the plane and didn't have long to wait before we were airborne and headed back home to Goose Bay and then on to Charlottetown, which would be our final destination. About leaving the ground here in Fort Lauderdale, leaving the United States, and our next stop would be in the province of Quebec at Pierre Elliott Trudeau Airport, where we would end up, as I said earlier, having to spend the night. Very uneventful flight from Fort Lauderdale to Montreal, and a pretty well direct flight with no stopping, and then we would have to go to the hotel, as the flight didn't get in till later in the evening. Next morning when we got up, we enjoyed the Christmas tree, beautiful that they had done, and then we boarded our transportation to the airport to get on our flight to head across the province of Quebec to Labrador, and then we would go to Halifax first and have a wait there before boarding a later flight that night, and then we would head into Goose Bay, and you can see the lights of the town here as we get closer to our final destination for this part of the trip. Temperature outside when we landed in Goose Bay was minus 15 degrees Celsius, a big change from the 27 that we had left Fort Lauderdale yesterday. We would spend our last night before heading back home to enjoy some hot chocolate, and then to put out some of the things that we had received over Christmas. And then we would get ready to settle in until we went on our next excursion.